Father and Son and Holy Ghost, amen. My dear friends, I got no idea why Saint Bibiana is the patron saint of artillery. I was in the artillery myself, and I asked why she is the patron saint of artillery, and never got a reply that I could remember at least. She and her sister were put to death under the Emperor Julian the Apostate. And not only they were killed, flogged to death, but also their parents were killed in the same persecution before them. And Julian the Apostate stands out as the last persecutor, the last great persecutor in the Roman Empire. Like Emperor Aurelian, he was a victorious general, he was an intelligent man, he was at least pretty smart on the battlefield. He won the Battle of Strasbourg. But like Aurelian, he turned against the Christians. He thought that the decay of the Empire of Rome was due to the neglect of the pagan gods. And so he turned and he persecuted the church terribly. So he's a 10th persecutor. So he comes after the Council of Nicaea, he comes after the conversion of Constantine. In a time of turmoil, he comes in, he takes power, and then he persecuted the church intensely. Not as intensely as Diocletian. Diocletian is the worst persecution, because it took place on a long time, there were plenty of victims, and paganism was in its death throes. The persecution of Julian the Apostate is just a last jolt of some pig that is already dead. Like when you kill a pig, it's dead but it still moves. You could say that's the type of persecution that took place in Julian the Apostate. The most famous persecutor is Emperor Nero. That's the first persecution. The nicest persecutors were Trajan. Trajan was very nice, very moderate, but still replied that Christians, if you catch them, kill them, but if not, let them go, basically. And so Tertullian says, what kind of crime is that? That if you catch us, you don't need to run after us, but if we get caught, and if we fancy, just kill us, otherwise let us go. That was very strange. And the other one was Marcus Aurelius. Even Antoninus Pius persecuted the Christians a little bit, and he listened to Saint Justin. He listened to him. Saint Justin came and talked to him and explained him how the Mass is. It's one of the earliest documents that we have on the contents of the Mass. And Antoninus Pius was kind of convinced, so he let the Christians go for a while, but then not so convinced. And so he restarted the persecution, and then the persecution went on more under Marcus Aurelius. And there was a big massacre in Lyon, in the capital of France of that time. And there is a persecution of Decius, was also a terrible persecution. And Decius, like Julian the Apostate, and like Aurelian, and like Diocletian, died a terrible death. I think Decius was caught, his horse got mired into a swamp, and the Visigoths caught up on him and killed him. I think Aurelian was captured by the Persians, the Emperor Sapor, and then Sapor used him for many years as a footstool to get on his horse, and he blinded him, so he had a miserable death. Tertullian shed his bowels, and then the persecutor of Saint Bibiana, Julian the Apostate, because he was a talented general, did the mistake that any Roman general must not make. That is, he attacked the Persian Empire. So he went there, he went deep in there, and then his army is sure enough got surrounded. Persian cavalry is far better than the Roman cavalry, and the Romans were far from their logistic supplies, and they got cut off, they got completely surrounded, and then one of the soldiers threw a javelin, and it went into the belly of Julian the Apostate, who had enough breath to say, "Thou hast conquered, Galilean." Because he called our Lord with a nickname, the Galilean. He despised him. So he said, "Thou hast conquered, Galilean." And then he died. And that was the end of the time of persecution for the Catholic Church, at least in Western Europe. Persecutions, of course, have continued. And Islam would be a great means to send lots of saints into heaven, lots of martyrs into heaven. But let us remember that those were great martyrs in the past. And what God is asking us today is to have a similar courage than the martyrs, so that we risk our lives, not so much, but we can risk our jobs, we can risk our liberty. We can be thrown into jail. We can be bad things are beginning to happen to those who behave according to the truth. So persecutions are beginning again. In what used to be the free world, persecution is beginning again, and it's a good thing. Let us get used to it. St. Paul exhorts the Hebrews. He told them, "Don't complain too much. You only have lost the loss of your goods." Basically, they were thrown out of their jobs or something like that. You only have lost your goods. So don't complain too much. Think about the others before you, who lost their lives. And he was referring to the greatest persecution in the Old Testament at the time of the Maccabees. There was a great organized persecution by King Antiochus Epiphanes. And so much so that this king was a figure of the Antichrist. And like Diocletian, he shed his bowels. He shed his bowels as he had failed to plunder a pagan temple in Ctesiphon, or Susa, one of the Persian capitals. He heard about the Jewish uprising and the defeat of Lysias. He was very furious. He was kind of a fat man. He was kind of fat, and he wanted to make piles of dead, in Jerusalem. And so he ordered the chariot on which he was to go faster. Go faster! I want to kill them all. And then the chariot had an accident, and he fell off the road. And then something inside of his bowels happened, and he started to shed his bowels. And the whole army of Antiochus Epiphanes was indisposed by the stench of its general. Imagine the order of one man being a big burden on an army of 20,000, because his army was big. And then he is a typical example of false contrition, like Julian the Apostate. Julian the Apostate was obdurate, but Antiochus wrote plenty of letters to reconcile with the Jews, that he was sorry for what he has done and everything. But all this was baloney, all this was to no avail, and he died the death of a reprobate. All this to tell you that, the sinners offend God in His presence, in His face. The sinners can do only what God allows them to do. So this reign of lies of today will last only a certain time. It has an allotted time, because they are offending divine majesty, the majesty of God. And so God never tolerates them forever. Their reign is only allowed for a greater good, and it's a short-lived reign. It's always cut short. As our Lord says, unless these times were cut short, none of the elect would be saved. But it's for the sake of the elect that this time is cut short. Because those persecutors, those Freemasons, are arrogant and they defy God. And so the more arrogant they are, the more they themselves cut short the time of their reign. Those who are decent, God allows them to reign, and so it was in the past. But as they grow arrogant, and when they think that their victory is certain, it is then that God takes them down. Now, Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.